announced, this is not a lecture type of presentation, which we have had in the last 3 days from the White Elephants. And I'm sure you enjoyed these lectures because it will help very much for your further study, how to write a proposal, how to write a thesis, and how to prepare a PowerPoint slide. Now this is a very different area. I'm going to speak about what's going on in the world and what we as citizens living on this planet have to take care, especially in this time of pandemics. And this is very important because our sciences of photogrammetry, remote sensing, and special information sciences are one of the key issues for the future of the world. In some aspects, I'm going to mention this at the end of my presentation and hopefully give some hints for the future of the world when we act properly. And this is the outline. I'm going to show some glimpses, some scenes during these days when the coronavirus has visited us. But the most important thing is how we lived before the coronavirus visit. What was the world? What was changing in the world? And I'm going to report, which I always announce in all my presentations on the lectures, a system of system of system of systems. This is a very interesting, let's say, thing that we have to think about it. And how the societal responses has been scheduled according to the changes before the coronavirus. These are some societal responses organized by international societies, by international conferences, etc. But the most of them are the Millennium Development Goals. Then I will talk about the UN 2030 agenda. And then we will come back at the end, life during the pandemics and later, what we have to do and what we can do. And then some forward looking. This is the outline of my presentation today. As I was told before, I'm coming from Istanbul. On the left top, you are seeing the street, the crowded street in Istanbul with the tram trying to go to the crowded people on the street. And after the corona trade, especially during the weekends, the street is empty. And all big cities and environments are empty, so that the deer also enjoys to visit to an environment in some places in South Africa. And we have some positive effects of this coronavirus also. In brackets, of course, positive. This is the nitrogen dioxide consumption from space, seen and derived from space, from December of the last year to March of the year. This is a series of videos.
Based on data from the Copernicus Sentinel-5P satellite, this animation shows the variation of nitrogen dioxide emissions from the 20th of December 2019 to the 16th of March 2020.
This is something, at least you can see that the activities of the human being are just affecting the environment so heavily so that when we are not going outside and banning all work, what we are doing outside in our society affects positively. This means we are affecting negatively the environment. And of course, the habitat, the lions lying on the street, nobody disturbs them in South Africa in the Kruger Park. The nature is going to take its natural way of living. And also some positive effect in India. For the first time, after 30 years, that the pollution of the north of India has gone lower, and therefore people can see the Himalayas from almost 200 kilometers away, the Himalayas, and they can enjoy it. I don't know whether we can call it as a positive effect, but this is the sign. But before the days before the coronavirus visited us, there was something changing in the world. You see on the left, a S-Bahn train stuck in the flood. This is Chemnitz, and this is a flat area. It has been so much rain in a very short time, and people call it flash rain, so that this S-Bahn train is stuck. But this is not the only change, because we have heavier precipitation in all parts of the world, and also in some parts of the world, we have more intense and longer droughts, no rain. And this is a very, very big problem for some parts. And what is changing? The most important thing what we change is the world population growth. In the last centuries, 50 years, starting 1950 until the 100 years, this 2050, we can see the projection at the mid of this century. It could be 3 projections. A high one goes to 10.5 billion. A medium one goes close to 9 billion, a low one over 7 billion. And so many people, when we call it in 1960, it was 3 billion people living on the planet. Now it is 8 billion. It's a very big jump. And what has been done in the meantime? There is a very big jump from coming through the rural areas to the urban areas. You see here, the world's population increased over 10-fold in 20th century, and half of this 8 billion people now live in urban centers. And this brings a very big problem to the world. And once more, Istanbul. I don't know whether you can see the cursor. Istanbul's lying on the midpoint of 3 continents: Africa, Europe, Asia. Here it is, or it is here. This is Europe, and this is Asia. This is the Bosphorus, the strait dividing Asia from Europe. And I'm going to show the land use change in the last 50 years in Istanbul, how it changed. This is 1945 land use in Istanbul metropolitan area also. The green areas are either forest. The red ones are the residential areas, and the these brown ones they are agricultural area. This is 1945. Now, (1968). red areas are expanding. As you see, the residential areas are expanding. 88, now a bridge is built over Bosphorus here, and the red areas are expanding. And this is 2000. And it's a very, very big problem. From 1 million people, around 55, we are having 18 million in that area. 18 million is a big, big, big problem. And the other one, look at these two pictures of Greenland. 92, 2002, 10 years. There is a big melting of the ice cover there. Very big one. And what is it? This, what I am going to show you is, I have taken from the International Panel of Climate Change. Dr. Pachauri was once its president of this Nobel Prize awarded committee. And this is the global temperature rise in the last almost more than 150 years. 150 years, this is the global temperature rise. With this global temperature rise, there is a global sea level rise also going up. And very big problem for the northern hemisphere in this globe, especially for the countries in the northern hemisphere, the snow cover is shrinking. The snow cover is shrinking. The snow cover is the source for many things. I will come to this once more. And these are also from the same publication. There is the ice caps of the Antarctica and Arctica. They are mass losses and they contributed to the sea level rise. And a very important one, decline of mountain glaciers. This decline of mountain glaciers are reducing water ability in many regions, especially in Asia. The Himalayan declining of the mountain glaciers is a big problem for the northern India because the water supply is very much dependent on these glaciers. The freshwater dependency of, and this is a very recent publication of the ocean and cryosphere changing. You see, this is very important why the sea level rise and temperature rise affects the environment. This is one of the methods. You see, the glaciers are melting. The snow cover is also melting because the permafrost temperature is rising. Sea ice, there is also sea ice in all parts, South and North Pole. This is also declining. And the ice sheet also from the side, this is also declining. Therefore, through the temperature, global temperature rise, the marine heat waves also on the surface is also rising. But a very, very important one, the ocean heat content is also rising. But two very important parameters, pH level and oxygen level, they are going down. pH level is very important for living species for fish. And the oxygen also the same for a healthy circulation on the open and down ocean. And there will be a sustaining climate change response to the living planet. There will be very big problems with this type of effects, especially oxygen level and also heat waves. What's happening? I'm coming to my special issue, disaster management. In the world, almost from 200 countries, half of them is being prone to disasters. This is the last statistic which I could get, unfortunately. This is 2016, last one. And it causes us, in that year, mainly you see Southeast Asia, including Japan and US, they are prone to natural disasters. And most of them are climatological and geophysical. Geophysical means earthquakes, and hydrological are floods. Meteorological are heat waves, etc. This is very important, so that almost 400 million people are affected by 100 countries, and almost 100 billion damages caused to these disasters. And what are the most important ones? China was in that year the most affected country by millions India. And this is especially for Asian countries a very big problem, especially the disasters, climate change, floods and droughts, and extreme disasters. And this is the last one of March 2018. There is a tendency rising up because when we are living on concentrated areas like in urbans, our capacity is reduced to cope with the disasters, with earthquakes, with floods, etc. So this is a very, very important effect of urban population growth in the world. And although the mortality is being reduced by some measures, but there is the economic damage of these disasters in the last years are rising. I'm coming once more to this one. This is really a very, very important one. So that there is a system before this. Everything is in a system, in oceans. And nobody believes that oceans are steady waters, etc. These are one of the main elements of our planet. And the circulations on the oceans, the streams on the oceans, because with these streams, we have a steady climate on the globe. This is a very important factor, so that if we change this through the marine heat waves and sea level rise, etc., we will have some problems in the future. And now I'm coming to this, what I have announced in the beginning. This is the system of systems. There is a very big global system in the world, system of the globe. And the system of the globe is consisting of systems. It is consisting of the water cycle. This is evaporation, heat exchange, atmospheric exchange, etc. There is a system of land. There is a system of atmospheric composition. There is a carbon cycle here so that we exchange carbon and also oxygen by forests. But what we do on the world, on the globe is we are having and interacting into this system. We are interacting into the system, and gradually we have begun since the beginning of, especially of the industrial age, we are beginning with it. Therefore, we have to be cautious with the system of systems because everything is encapsulated in each other. When you get one of the system in not stable one label, then the system responds to you. And because the system, the planet Earth is a dynamic system. If you change this dynamics inside, then the Earth system responds to you. And these are the floods, these are the temperature rise, these are then caused the sea level rise and many other things. And the responses. Of course, in the last decade of the last century, people have realized this cannot go further. They said we have to do something at it. And this is from the United Nations. They have signed a Millennium Development Goals. Millennium, because in 2000, we are just changing from one millennium to the next millennium of 2000. And therefore, they called it Millennium Development Goals, and they have had some goals inside with target date of 15 years. In 2015, it should be achieved. What are they? We should eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Many societies should receive a primary education. Of course, the most important in the several societies are the gender inequality. We should promote gender equality and, of course, support women. Reduce child mortality, improve maternal health. This means both of them having together, combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. All of three are related with health, as you see, at the time of the millennium, as you see, HIV, AIDS, malaria. We are still facing the same problems with these viruses also, similar viruses. Therefore, the first time, they said environmental sustainability is very important. They took care of the system of systems for the first time. And of course, they said every country cannot do by itself. We have to develop a global partnerships together and check each other's what we have, if they have achieved, what we have achieved, etc., and report to the United Nations. But at the end of 2015, this cannot, some of them has been realized. But this was not enough. And then the people come together in the September 2015 once more, and they prepared another plan. And this is an action plan for people on this planet and prosperity that seeks to strengthen universal peace and freedom. Of course, these SDGs are more detailed than the Millennium Development Goals. It is more universal. You will see it. Now, there are these areas, 17 goals: no poverty, no hunger, good health. This is these days important. Quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, renewable energy, good jobs and economic growth, innovative and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption, climate action, life beyond water, as I mentioned, life on land, peace and justice. The last one is partnership for all that we achieve together. Millennium Development Goals were only the 7 goals without any, let's say, specific targets inside. But this time, there are almost 170 targets. And these 170 targets has been also defined in such a way that they are measurable in scope of the time. Therefore, every target has 1 or 2 indicators, and these indicators are changeable. And all affiliated, UN affiliated governments have signed this agreement. And let's come to these days, what we do. During the pandemics, very important one, the spread of the disease. This containment is the most effective way to slow down the and lockdown is some problem, but the lockdown, all people at home, has also some limitations. And it can bring us to social fear, social isolation, and when they are recovered from the... So we have to look for people who are affected by the virus and target them. And many countries are doing these days. And during these days, there is some vocabulary in our discussions, in our speeches. These are social distancing, contact tracing. Contact tracing, they say, the WHO, World Health Organization, tells is very important to trace the contact. People in contact with someone who is infected with the virus are at higher risk of becoming infected themselves and potentially further infecting others. Closely watching these contacts after exposure to an affected person will help the contacts to get care and treatment and will prevent further transmission of the virus, it says. And this is contact tracing. This contact tracing has been used in many countries, but this is the technology, especially now developing some big companies like Google and Apple. They are preparing an app for this. As you see the sign here. And so that you are alerted if you are getting into contact with someone immediately. And also the central management is also alerted that this person, the infected person, is in contact with other persons, etc. But there are some privacy problems with these diagnosed carriers. Because you have to trace the people. You have to know their locations constantly. And the people sometimes tell these are violating my public identification, my privacy. Sometimes the personal information is not being published, but this can be anyhow pursued. And when identified publicly, diagnosed carriers often face, as you see in this picture, harsh persecution and the problems during this. Of course, there is some good, let's say, actions there. And our sciences, especially GIS sciences, are helping to trace the people. There is a European Union, a digital solidarity call against pandemics. And here, the European data protection is a very important task, and the supervisor of this data protection agency says that the general data protection law and regulation allows the processing of sensitive private information when it was in the interest of the public health. This is the response of the people who are in charge for this type of big data. But we have to take care of all our business and sciences. Therefore, we have to think of our pandemic, after pandemic, what we are going to do in our business. In our business in the future, the most important thing nowadays is also, it's valid, that we share the data with open data. And it is the value of open data sharing, which has been published by the group of Earth Observation, GEO. And this helps the country, the economy, the sense. I will show you in the coming slide. When Landsat scenes are being open for pre-download, before open data policy, only 53 scenes per day has been downloaded. After open data policy now, in last years, there's almost 6,000 scenes per day. And this means that the annual economic benefit of the countries is in the US, 1.7 billion, internationally, 400 million, and 2.1 million. Now, we come why we are interacting so much with this and what we are going to do with our sciences in the future. Let me tell you something, what was happening in the last 200 years. So more than 200 years, the first industrial revolution has begun on steam machines, water-driven machines, etc. Then after, at the end of the second half of 19th century, there was mass production for the first time, use of electrical energy in fabricants. The third one, starting 1970s, IT technology, electronics, and of course the first programmable computers. And nowadays, we are on the first industrial revolution. What is this first physical? That the physical systems are collaborating with each other. There is a complex system now. Every PC can connect to the other, and the data is being collected to each other in a certain level of permit. But we are approaching a new revolution, fifth industrial revolution. Here, our sciences will play a very important role because you are people who are going to live and to work under the fifth industrial revolution. In the fourth industrial revolution, AI technologies, or big data, robotics, or blockchain or crypto technology. These were important. But in the fifth industrial revolution, there will be much closer cooperation between people and machines, and machine to machine, car to car, vehicle to vehicle. And this is the connectivity. And the most important thing is the connectivity now in the fifth industrial revolution you are going to face. And for the geoinformation sciences, what does it mean? It means that all sensors are going to be interconnected, all sensors. And for the space sciences, connection between all centers and satellites, especially constellations, are very important, so that we can receive the information from them immediately. But there are some bottlenecks which you have to work on. There is not a very big high rate of data communication between the satellites and ground, and also between different space platforms and sensors, and from space platforms to the ground. And this Earth observation in the future must have a very, very big problem of this rate. And this should be, communication rate should be overcome. Some attempts on this is being done in some companies in Germany, US, and other countries, especially using laser communication, speaking between them, combining their sensors, and then downloading to the data to the nature, to the ground. Now, these are the human needs, what we have seen in the last, and human needs are very important. What we have seen in the history, human needs were very important. But in this, before this, we achieved these industries, everywhere it was in harmony with the nature. We lived in harmony. They lived in the harmony with the nature. But it is forgotten. You know that before America discovered by Columbus, there was Native Indians, Native Americans there. And there was some clashes between the deviations, discrepancies between the Native Americans and people who conquered America. And there is a wonderful speech of the Chief Seattle, Indian chief. It says, how can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of land? This idea is strange to us. If you do not own the freshness of the air and sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? And it goes. This is the Indian chief said this at that time. But we have to work closely with a positive future from now on. Most of the innovations are already being seen at the end of the tunnel with some lights. But you all have to adapt this to the current situation and what we have learned from the past. And there is a new approach which has been in scientific community discussing. And it says, advancing science as a global public good. Then the future will amaze you. Thank you for listening to me. This is the end of my presentation.